So we'll have several keynotes, as was mentioned earlier. But to dive into the topic this morning and get started, I would like to introduce our first keynote speaker, who will be Jenny Lay-Flurrie this morning, the Chief Executive Officer of Microsoft, who will address the topic on the new chapter for AI. As Chief Executive Officer of Microsoft, Jenny has championed inclusion, equity, and views accessibility as a fundamental right. So very close to our own views of the world at GCICT and IAAP. She joined Microsoft in 2005 and initially was working on Hotmail and Bing. Jenny, I still have my Hotmail account. So I'll be proud of it. Initially was really passionate about accessibility and helped create the Disability Employee Resource Group at Microsoft, which is honestly, I've been there a few times, an extraordinary organization within Microsoft Corporation, and ultimately became the Chief Executive Officer of Microsoft. I think it's fair to say that Jenny has led a very comprehensive approach to accessibility at Microsoft. Since 2016, that's 7 years, she has been driving accountability across the company and really foster the digitally disability inclusive culture. That goes from engineering processes to physical accessibility to skilling and inclusive hiring. I would say that Jenny is really the ultimate corporate advocate for accessibility we are working with. So please help me welcome Jenny Lay-Flurrie at the podium for her keynote.
Thank you, Axel. Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, folks. So who has a Hotmail address? Let's get this out the way. I'm asking the room. There's maybe 30% of the hands go up. Me too. It is an incredible honor to be with you today. I'm Jenny Lay-Flurrie. I'm here to talk about the future and artificial intelligence. But before I go there, let me just say that I've got a bit of imposter syndrome because it's kind of intimidating being in front of all of my peers. And I think my 10-year-old self would be a little bit confused. My goal in life was to be a professional clarinetist, folks. That was my option one. My option two was to be a music therapist when I realized after music school that I wasn't anywhere good enough to be a musician, and I didn't have strong enough a heart to work in palliative music therapy. I went with option three, which was getting a job that would pay the rent. Option three led me to the Daily Mirror. The Daily Mirror and working on the IT help desk. That wasn't exactly the career that my music professors thought I would go into, but a week in, they said, "Hey, are you having fun?" And I said, "Yeah, it's really good problems to be solved." And over the years, I think we've reached the most ultimate problem of all. How do we deliver on the promise of accessibility as a fundamental right? My journey from the late 90s, I am that old, folks, has been quite fascinating and gone through lots of these different waves of technology. Y2K, if anyone remembers Y2K, anyone? Please, thank you, I feel so much better. You go into then, how do you realize the potential of broadband? The launch of Xbox, the launch of Hotmail, this little thing called Bing, which is what pulled me from London, UK, that is a British accent, to Seattle, where it is still raining, as I left, back in 2006. It landed me into what I think is the biggest problem of all as we navigate these industry shifts, is how do we realize the full inclusion of the 1.3 billion people, which is the latest number from the World Health Organization, in December of 2022. And I was sitting there this weekend thinking this through, knowing that I was going to be completely intimidated coming up here. And I was in my happy place this weekend, back in Seattle, and I was baking. I've got 4 kids, me and my husband, and The youngest is 16, and so my house is always full of teenagers, and they seemingly are always hungry. And so I bake a lot, and as soon as I bake something, they eat it, and then they demand more. But they also talk to me, which I think is a gift for any parent. And eventually, we're solving all manner of things in conversation. My goodness, teenagers. And then they ask me the question, Jenny, when are you going to be done with this accessibility thing? Has anyone else had that question? When are you going to fix it? Now, my flippant answer is by Tuesday. My more logical answer, knowing that I had, a 15-year-old at the table, was to ask him to look behind him. Behind him was a set of stairs. And I asked him to think, do you think I'm going to fix it by Tuesday? Because these things are everywhere. And he goes, oh, that's really good. Grabbed a muffin and run off, right? Xbox was calling his name. But this is the problem of our time. This world was not built for disabled people. I am proudly deaf and disabled. It wasn't built for me. It was built with the inclusion of stairs. Now, if we look at this from the physical angle and we look at what we can do to empower a more accessible world in the physical space, I have to just pull the easiest example, which is go to my home state, back to Washington, and actually my office, which is Red West A. And this, I took a little picture of the entrance to my building about a month ago. The sun is still shining. And what you can see on this page is just a very simple explanation of how this space is built to be inclusive by design. And that little video didn't work, so I'm going to try it one more time. In the middle is an image, and if this little video would work, it would show how when you walk to the entrance of our building, one of our 330 buildings around the world, what you're able to do is navigate using tactile strips in the concrete. There's Braille maps. There is Braille and tactile and low vision signage on every single fridge. In fact, all our cans are put in the same place in every fridge in every building. Simple things that we have done to make sure that our buildings are not only accessible, but we've gone beyond to make them inclusive. It is a framework that has enabled us to take this inaccessible world and help to make it more accessible. And not just hitting the bare minimum, but going beyond to empower people with disabilities. And I'll tell you that disability ERG that Axel mentioned, that is my proudest moment, was being a part of the creation of that. Our mobility team, our blind crew, in fact, the 23 different communities at Microsoft helped to inform the design of every single one of our buildings. So what does that mean for the digital world? Well, in the digital world, Microsoft is one company of many in this room. We don't have 300 buildings in the digital world. My inventory is over 6,000. 6,000 products, apps, websites, and services that we have to make sure we have exactly the same process with. We're building and ensuring that we're including all of the minimum bar, but then going far beyond. Now, it's not a perfect science. In fact, I do not believe that accessibility is about perfection. But it is about building a framework that scales. And over the last 7, nearly 8 years, and my predecessor, Rob, who I'm sure is in the room before me, we set about really building that structure that would scale. How do we do it? We do it through a lot of people, in fact, thousands, the hub and spoke model. So I have my amazing gang of humans, some of whom are in the room today, but far more important than them, sorry, you are important, just not that important. I'm in trouble later, is how we work across a company and how we work with many of you to pull in your expertise. Most important of which is actually our disability answer desk, which is our support channel. That's how I kind of slid into this gig. That is our support channel. We take 13,000 calls a month from disabled customers and employees. It's a cyclical process that pulls in that expertise, gets it right to the people, we file those bugs, and we get them resolved. And it's allowed us to scale from an inventory of a few hundred in the digital world to over 6,000. And if you ask me what is the one single most important aspect to this that's enabled us to leap, it's training. Now, you all may be like, really? And I'm like, yes. I made it mandatory, with the help of many great folks, mandatory for every Microsoft employee to take accessibility training. They really liked me for a while. Because everybody loves mandatory training, don't you? We love that. But it raised the collective wealth. It meant that I wasn't having to walk in the room as a deaf person and explain what I needed. They didn't speak to my interpreter, they spoke to me. When I said turn on the captions, there were no eyebrows. It raised that collective wealth, and it meant that we could accelerate. And we're now proud to have over 1.7 million having taken that training. You think that's good. It's fun, right? And I thought it was going all tickety-boo, and we were like, yeah, we've got like the Xbox adaptive controller, I've got an inclusive trackpad, I've got like this really cool mouse. We've got so many cool things that have come out of this model. And then the holiday happened, and I started getting calls from my friends at Bing. And this thing called GPT happened. Anyone see that in the news? Couple of you? It was everywhere. And I tell you, my holiday was a mixture of baking and fielding calls from Bing. How do we make sure that GPT is accessible? Good question. Well, let's figure this one out. And like every single technological revolution that's happened before it, it takes energy, time, and thinking. But the first thing to do is to wallow in what this is. AI ain't new, folks. In fact, if you go back and search through GPT, it will give you a potted history of AI. I found yesterday, I was on the plane. AI, artificial intelligence, dates back to the 1950s. And you'll find that every single company here, in fact, many of you, are using AI in your everyday life. I was test driving a car the other day, and it was stopping the car for me. That's rude, by the way. Don't do that. It's artificial intelligence. AI is embedded into our lives. But what is new this year is generative AI. It's generating content on the back of foundational models, which is the new term for many have been calling large language models. It is consuming an utter incredible amount of data to generate content for you. Now, what does this mean for us? Well, I tell you that what we had to do very quickly is put out our principles of how we were going to tackle this if we had any chance of being ahead of the curve. We all know that to build something inclusively and accessibly, you've got to embed it right from the start. We cannot start this gig 2 years from now and try to retrofit. We all know what that's going to take. So we had to launch 3 key principles, leaning on all of our wealth to make sure that all of our designers internally were building inclusively. Now, they're not rocket science. The first one is be accessible. It's very complicated, which basically was my call to every single person at Microsoft to let them know that the bar hasn't shifted. If you are going to build a new piece of code, it must still deliver on our standards. But the second 2 were slightly different. The second one is to make sure that we are inclusive of disability representative data. If you don't have data that represents your community, you are not going to build an accessible or inclusive data model. And the last was to innovate, and all of this being grounded to pull in the insights of people with disabilities and the community and tackle some of the historical problems that we know exist with artificial intelligence, which is there is a lack of disability data. So what are we learning through this, and how can AI help? Well, there's 5 quick examples I want to show you that illuminate the possibilities, and also the potential risk for us all as we lean into, bluntly, this moment right now. The first is productivity. And there are two simple little GIFs on the page that really illustrate this, and I'll give you one other example. One of the beautiful things about generative AI is that it will pull all of that data in and help you to synthesize something very quickly. So I've got the dyslexia Wikipedia page here, and I'm asking it to synthesize it down to a couple of bullets for me. It does it real fast. We've also loaded a ton of data in on accessibility into those models. So that age-old question, which I know you are all getting asked, is what is the ROI to accessibility in your company? Which, by the way, is a trap. Don't answer it. Putting that on the page. But I'll tell you the biggest one that I'm finding is I love transcripts. I use them every day. I use transcripts and captioning. And what those are now doing is at the end of my meeting, it is scraping that transcript and generating me meeting notes. By the way, that was built on the back of accessibility. Pretty cool, right? Number two, ableism. And what do I mean by ableism? Is that we have some options to really advance the understanding of disability, or we could propagate bias that exists in society as it stands today. And I've got two examples for you that illustrate the possibilities. These are through my favorite search engine, sorry, Google, Bing. I love Bing. I was part of the building team for it. But we've been able to get some data live now in Bing if you're planning a vacation. Simple, right? But we all know how hard it can be to plan a vacation if you're a wheelchair user and to getting real, tangible information on. So if you put a prompt in there, you're getting out real information that you could use to plan a vacation. We'll take that same principle where you've got loaded data in there that's useful, valuable, and doesn't see disability as something negative, but sees it as part of being the human experience, which is what it is, and take it to the next level of what could be possible. And the age-old of telling a disability joke. If you put into any search engine today, tell me a joke about disability, what will be the answer you get? Some ridiculous ableist joke. That shouldn't be the case. How about we're able to use Gen AI instead to educate people that that ain't cool, folks? Let's not do that. We have the chance to impact ableism in a profound way. Number three, employment. Now, employment, as we know, the numbers have gotten better this year, but the gap is still prevalent. It burns me when I look at those stats, and I am a data nerd. I love statistics. But how can we lean into AI to potentially change that moment? And there are possibilities with Gen AI to not screen out, but to screen in. And the best example here is Mentra. Angelica is here, and I'm not going to steal her thunder. She's going to give you some examples in the panel shortly that really talk to how. The fourth, independence. And I have to pause here for a second and just celebrate the work of Be My Eyes. Who's using Be My Eyes? All right, well, Peter, you don't get extra points for waving both your hands, but nice try. That was maybe 20% of the room. So all of you now need to take an action to download Be My Eyes on your Fruity devices and become a volunteer, one of 600,000 volunteers that Be My Eyes has that help blind and low vision people to use and to see the world. Now, the one thing that we've been doing with Be My Eyes since 2017 is we plugged it into the disability answer desk. So when a blind low vision customer calls us, they can call us using Be My Eyes. They can take a picture of the environment that they have. That could be a cable they're trying to connect or an error screen, which never happens on Windows. And then they work with Disability Answer Desk to get that solved. Well, imagine instead of having to take a picture, you're using Be My AI. You are using GPT-4 through OpenAI to take a picture of that environment before you ever have to hit a human. This is an Excel spreadsheet. And taking a picture, and they're trying to figure out a table, a simple explanation. And Be My Eyes is guiding them on how to build the right formula to add the result of that spreadsheet. Here's the kicker. We've had this in pilot. 90% of those that use Be My AI don't have to wait to speak to a human. It means that person is able to solve their query quicker and faster without waiting on the call line for someone to pick up the phone. Independence. And lastly, the biggest one in many ways of all, for all of us accessibility nerds, is how do we embed AI to design, build, and test? I could spend an hour talking, I won't, because you'll kick me off. But this is the one that of everything I am the most excited about. Why? Because it's not okay that testing tools can only illuminate 40% of queries today. We need to be more efficient if we are to move with this modern age. And ultimately, we all know the biggest thing that we have to get our arms around is building accessible code right from building it. You didn't have to clap at that. So what does this mean? What does it mean to us? There is a brilliant report written by Henry Claypool that I was reading on the plane yesterday. And I thought it beautifully summarized the ask for us all as we lean into this moment. That's 5 examples of 50. It's also 5 examples of 100 where we could get this wrong. How we lean into this moment, how we work together, how we build the better data sets, engage the disability community. We have to do this in a thoughtful, inclusive, and participatory, which is a really difficult word for a deaf girl to end on, way. It is crucial that we lean into this trend and this moment. And so I am honestly honored to be here and to work with all of you to hopefully be able to turn around to that teenager in a year and said, you know what? We fixed it. Maybe a little bit. Thank you.